a true 50/50
Good morning, everyone.
partnership
Human
with
Genome
GSK
Sciences
on that.
at
Quite
the
that
2010
way,
Global
a
Healthcare
true joint venture.
Conference.
And we
Today's
have a
date,
very good cash position. We ended
3/3/2011.
last year with $933 million of cash. We expect to end
David
this year with
Southwell,
$550 to $650
EVP
million
and
of cash.
CFO,
So we're well
Human
financed
Genome
for the launch
Sciences,
of
Inc.
Benlysta. In the long term, we have other indications and other dosage forms for Benlysta, and I'll get into some of what those are. We have a great cash cow, which is a product that we sell to the Strategic National Stockpile for inhalation anthrax, but the treatment of inhalation anthrax. And then we have a pipeline of products that we've licensed out to GSK, one of which is particularly interesting, both from a size perspective and an economic perspective for us, which is the cardiovascular product. We have our own oncology program in phase 1 and phase 2, and we have an earlier product that is going into phase 2 for ulcerative colitis. One of the keys with this company is that we started out being basic in biologics manufacturing. So we are actually a contract manufacturing organization for some other companies on manufacturing, just to use up the factories that we have that will ultimately be used for our own products. But we really are basic in biologics manufacturing, and that's obviously very important given some of the issues that have happened with other biologics companies. So let's start out with Benlysta. This is, if approved next Thursday, this would be the first drug approved for SLE, which is another name for lupus, in 50 years. There's a very high unmet need. Lupus is treated with relatively toxic drugs at the moment. We have a very good and productive alliance with GSK, and as a result of the rheumatologists, we have a very targeted
MMTs, make sure you're logged in.
For those of you that aren't familiar with lupus, it's an autoimmune disease that results from excess production of autoantibodies. So essentially what is happening here is your immune system is attacking your organs. And there are many horrible symptoms, including pain and fatigue.
We have talked about
mortality rate.
You can advance the slide set there if you click those arrows down the bottom.
All right, we're live video, Mr. Brady. Thank you.
The reason this is such a tough
what you're saying
disease to treat
that there's a complete display
lupus expresses itself in different ways
everything
in different
they're
patients.
doing in
So
their
some
slideshow.
patients may have the traditional malar rash
Correct.
that you see in the face, which is obviously a dermatologic manifestation of lupus. Other patients have a kidney manifestation of lupus. So one of the really hard things about getting a drug that works for lupus is getting an endpoint that works for all of these different organ systems. And we were helpful in coming up with a symptom reduction index, which is what we used and what has now become the standard for lupus treatment. There's a set of guidelines that were put out by the FDA on that, which essentially match what we did. And
FDA involvement.
We figured out a way to actually measure lupus, which is not a small achievement. The lupus market is about 325,000 patients in the U.S. Some of the foundations that work with lupus, like the Lupus Foundation of America, would say that the overall patient population is 1.5 million patients that have lupus or related conditions. But typically, when you have positive biomarkers,
Ryan Playing, Douglas has already set up and got the links and everything,
sir.
sir.
Of a rheumatologist. And so the way we define the market is patients that are under the care of a rheumatologist that have lupus. And we estimate 325,000 of those. Of those, 125,000 of those have mild disease. So they're probably well treated with the existing products, which are antimalarials, which is what they generally start out with, steroids like prednisone, and immunosuppressants occasionally, but it's usually steroids and antimalarials with the milder patients. Once they progress to being moderate or severe, they're typically going into a doctor's office frequently, and those were the patients that we studied. So we're seeking approval for the same group of patients that we studied, and that represents 200,000 patients in the United States. Our product met the primary endpoint in 2 phase 3 trials. One was in Latin America and the Asia Pacific, which was called Bliss 52, and the second was in the United States and Europe, which was called Bliss 76. we had a special protocol assessment with the FDA, and they told us that they'd like to see a certain reduction in the index with statistical significance at 52 weeks in 2 studies, and we achieved that in Bliss 52 and Bliss 76. 52, of course, is 52 weeks.
They had approvals and all of these clinical 2 phase 3 trials right here.
Beyond the 1 year to see to get some extended secondary data on the drug, and we got some very good data going out to 76 weeks.
Positive data out to 76 weeks.
Beyond the primary endpoint with this. They included the real symptoms that rheumatologists are looking at with lupus patients. They're very focused on the reduction of steroid use because steroids can be very toxic. They're very focused
steroidal toxics.
They're focused on the reduction of fatigue in particular, and we had very good results in the FACIT fatigue index. And they, of course, look at the biomarkers, the serological activity. We have studied in our phase 2 and our phase 3 studies almost 2,000 patients for SLE. In our phase 2 extension study, we've had patients that have been on the drug for 6 years or more, and we typically have a dropout rate in that group of patients of about 5%.
Up to 6 years in phase 2 continuation studies. It's not like they started doing this yesterday.
Infusion, so it's not an easy course of treatment. We also allowed patients in our studies to take the other therapies that they take, which further complicates the studies because you have all these concomitant medications that people are taking. So they were allowed
risk
to take
disclosure,
the
risk
management. For lupus. So we truly were not studying
in my
the drug
view,
against placebo. We were studying it against standard of care.
Met their endpoints because they have all the factual data here in this presentation to prove so.
Drug. All of the patients in the trials had active SLE. They all had positive autoantibodies, which were either anti-nuclear antibodies or anti-double-stranded DNA. The Salina-SLEDAI score is a measure of all of the organs.
Right here.
It's a very difficult measure to get.
This one is the most difficult measure.
They all have to have a certain score, which is greater than or equal to 6.
There you go. You have to have a score equal to 6.
At least 2 therapies, mostly prednisone and mostly an anti-malarial, and many of them were on other therapies as well. We excluded very few patients in the 200,000 from our studies. Those that had severe active kidney disease were excluded because they were typically on a drug like IV Cytoxan, which is so strong that you really can't measure the effect of a maintenance therapy like Benlysta against something like that. That represents very few patients. Typically what will happen is when you get kidney involvement, that patient was studied on Benlysta, but if they progressed to the point where they needed a real rescue therapy like Cytoxan, then they would be pulled off of Benlysta and they would be out of the study. So we did not study those patients, but they represent a very small percentage of the overall patient base. We also excluded those with severe active CNS disease, largely because they weren't capable of staying in the study if they had psychosis or seizures. And again, that was a relatively small number of patients. As you can imagine, since we're close to the FDA action date, we're very geared up for the commercialization of Benlysta.
They're very geared up for commercialization of Benlysta.
9th of last year, and we got a 3-month delay from the FDA to
3-month delay.
This year.
But guess
so
what?
We were ready to
7 days from now is the 10th.
At the beginning of January, and so we're very ready to launch the drug now.
They're ready to launch.
We really have 3 focuses of our commercial organization. The first is to go out to payers. We want to encourage the appropriate access. We want to make sure that we get the proper access for the drug and work with them on their coverage policies. That's going to be managed primarily by GlaxoSmithKline. We're also focused, of course, on
Glaxo will be playing a role.
That consists of the doctors who need to understand the product, but also the back office, because this is a buy and bill product, and so the
buy and build product.
Buy the drug and then they'll infuse it. While rheumatologists are very used to infused drugs and they're very used to buy and bill products, in the early stages, getting reimbursement and setting up our copay
and all of that will have to come secondary. First, we need the approval.
Assistance program takes a lot of work with the healthcare professionals in their back office, and so we're going to be doing that. And then with patients, we
creatively
have a website, usinlupus.com, and
using financial skills
other means
to be able to
distribute and also their treatment options. So we're going to have a lot of support that goes out to the payers, the physicians, and the patients. On the Salesforce side, between us and GSK, we're going to have approximately 150 sales reps in the United States. These are great sales reps. I came out of a primary care company.
150 sales reps, and I'm sure they've been very busy for the last few months.
Sales reps. These are the best sales reps I've ever encountered in this industry. They come out of some other very preeminent companies like Abbott, Amgen, Biogen, BMS. We've found that we've been a very attractive destination for a lot of these sales reps, and they all have significant experience with other rheumatology biologics, so they know what they're doing when it comes to biologics. We're also building our presence in Europe. We're going to have our